Please do not hurt her. Please don't scare her. Please tell us where to find her.
You're bullying me. I mean, what exactly is it that you're trying to say?
Que viu Madeleine novamente?
That you did see Madeleine again.
No, I didn't. I didn't. Are you saying that I had something to do with Madeleine's disappearance?
Did you?
Picture it. A child's bedroom, small, dark, still warm from the little bodies that had been sleeping in it just hours before. A single bed pushed against the wall. On the pillow, a small stuffed cat. A pink blanket folded back. The window shutter raised from the outside. The curtain moving softly in the night air. And the bed, empty, not messy, not disturbed. The sheets still held the shape of the child who had been lying there. Everything was exactly as it should have been, except she wasn't. Not taken from a dangerous street. Not snatched from somewhere unsafe, taken from her bed in a holiday apartment while her parents sat 55 meters away. She was 3 years old, and by the time her mother pushed open that bedroom door, she was already gone. Praia da Luz, Portugal. The name means beach of light, and that is exactly what it felt like. Whitewashed walls, cobblestone streets, a little resort town on the southern Algarve coast where British families came every single summer because nothing bad ever happened there. The kind of place where you left your doors unlocked, let your children run ahead on the path to the pool, and felt, completely and deeply, that the world was exactly as it should be. That is what Praia da Luz was on the evening of the 3rd of May, 2007, and it is what it would never quite be again. But before we go anywhere near the investigation, the suspects, the courtrooms, the 19 years of silence and screaming headlines, I need you to hear one thing first. Just one. Because this detail is what this entire story turns on. On the morning she disappeared, that very morning, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann sat at the breakfast table, looked up at her parents, and asked them a question. A quiet, specific, devastating question. She said, "Why didn't you come when Sean and I cried last night?" Her parents had no answer, because they hadn't heard anything, because the apartment had been silent when they checked, which means that when Madeleine and her baby brother cried in that bedroom the night before she vanished, someone else was already there, waiting, watching. And they came back the next night to finish what they had started. This is a true crime documentary about Madeleine Beth McCann, and this story is far more complicated and far darker than you might expect. Before we get into the investigation, the evidence, and the man who would eventually become the only suspect in one of the most watched cases in modern history, you need to know who Madeleine McCann actually was. Not the case, not the missing child poster, her. Because this documentary is not just about what happened. It is about who was lost when it did. Madeleine Beth McCann was born on the 12th of May, 2003 in Leicester, England. She was 3 years old, 3 years, 11 months, and 22 days old to be exact, when she vanished. She lived with her family in Rothley, a quiet village in Leicestershire, where her parents, Dr. Kate McCann and Dr. Jerry McCann, both worked as physicians and had built a steady, ordinary, happy life. She had 2 younger siblings, twins named Sean and Amelie, who were just 2 years old that May. And if you spoke to anyone who had ever spent 5 minutes with Madeleine McCann, they would tell you the same thing immediately. She was impossible to ignore. Kate McCann described her daughter in her memoir as bright, funny, loving, and fiercely determined. She was the kind of child who walked into a room and immediately became the center of it, not because she demanded attention, but because she radiated something that just pulled people toward her. She loved Robbie Williams. She would dance around the living room to his songs with the kind of full-body, zero self-consciousness joy that only very small children can manage. She loved Fireman Sam, she loved swimming, and had spent the entire week at the Ocean Club Kids Club in the pool every morning, shrieking the way 3-year-olds shriek when the water hits them and the sun is out and everything is exactly perfect. She had a small stuffed cat called Cuddle Cat that she would not sleep without. She had a pink blanket, she had blue-green eyes, blonde hair, and one detail that was completely, irreplaceably unique. A rare condition called a coloboma in her right eye, a small dark stripe across the iris, almost like a brushstroke of ink, that made her gaze like no one else's in the world. That stripe would end up on every missing person poster, every billboard across Europe, every news broadcast in a dozen languages, because once you saw it, you never forgot it. Her family was on holiday. 7 days at the Ocean Club booked months in advance, a reward for a year of ordinary life. The twins were thriving. Madeleine was happy. On the afternoon of the 3rd of May, the penultimate day of the holiday, Kate McCann took a photograph of her daughter at 14:29. Madeleine was sitting beside her father at the pool, squinting into the Portuguese sun, her baby sister Amelie next to her. She looked completely ordinary. She looked completely alive. She looked like a child with an entire future stretching out ahead of her. That photograph is the last one ever taken of Madeleine Beth McCann. She should have had decades left. She should have had a lifetime. Thursday, the 3rd of May, 2007. The family's day was completely, utterly unremarkable, right up until it wasn't. Madeleine and the twins had spent the morning at the resort's kids club. The McCann group, Kate, Jerry, and 5 other couples who had all come to Portugal together, had fallen into the comfortable rhythm of a family holiday. Afternoons at the pool, dinner at the tapas restaurant on the other side of the complex. That evening at 6 o'clock, Kate brought the 3 children back to apartment 5A, a ground floor unit in block 5 with a bedroom that sat right beside the front door and a metal exterior shutter on the window that the McCanns kept pulled down each night. By 7 o'clock, the children were in bed. Madeleine was in her pink and white Eeyore pajamas. Cuddle Cat was on the pillow next to her. The pink blanket was tucked in. The bedroom door was left slightly open, the front door of the apartment left unlocked, and at 8:30, Kate and Jerry walked the 55 meters to the tapas restaurant to join their friends. Their arrangement that week was to take turns checking on the children every 30 to 40 minutes while the adults ate together. Completely normal. At 9 o'clock, Jerry McCann walked back to the apartment and let himself in through the unlocked front door. He looked in on the bedroom. All 3 children were there, sleeping. He stood in the hallway for a few minutes and had a brief, easy conversation with a family friend, Jez Wilkins, who was passing outside with a pushchair. Normal. He walked back to the restaurant. At approximately 9:10, just minutes after Jerry had left, a woman named Jane Tanner, one of the group, walked past the apartment on her own check. She saw a man moving away from the direction of the apartment block. He was walking quickly. He was carrying what looked like a child in pajamas. She assumed it was a father carrying a sleeping toddler. She kept walking. She would think about that moment every day for the rest of her life. At 10 o'clock, Kate McCann walked to apartment 5A for her check. She went in through the patio doors. She moved into the hallway. Something stopped her. The bedroom door, which they had always left slightly open, was now open wider than it should have been. She reached out to close it. As she touched it, a sudden draft slammed it shut. She pushed it back open. She looked into the room. Sean was in his cot. Amelie was in her cot. Madeleine's bed was empty. Cuddle Cat was on the pillow. The pink blanket was there. The window shutter, which should have been down, was raised. The curtain was moving in the night air. Kate McCann ran, back through the resort, back to the restaurant. And she said the words, "Madeleine's gone. She's gone." One of the group called the Portuguese emergency services at 2214. The voice on that call was barely holding itself together. A child was missing. She was 3 years old. She had blonde hair and blue-green eyes and a small dark stripe across her right iris that made her look like no one else in the world, and she was gone. The Policia Judiciaria arrived within the hour. What they found at apartment 5A was a scene that immediately refused to make sense. No forced entry. The front door had been unlocked all evening. The bedroom window shutter was raised. Whether it had been opened by an intruder coming in, going out, or by Kate during her frantic search of the room, became one of the most fiercely contested questions in the entire case. By daylight, Praia da Luz had transformed. What had been a quiet, sun-warmed holiday resort 12 hours earlier was now the center of one of the largest missing child searches in European history. British holidaymakers, Portuguese locals, resort staff, over 150 volunteers within the first 48 hours, combing the coastal cliffs, the beaches, the surrounding scrubland. The reward for information leading to Madeleine's safe return eventually reached €1 million, with donations from Simon Cowell, J.K. Rowling, and Richard Branson, among others. Madeleine's face was on billboards across Portugal within days and across Europe within a week. 14 police agencies became involved across multiple countries, and the case became, as it would remain for nearly 2 decades, the most heavily reported missing child case in modern history. 9 days in, a man stepped forward and made himself impossible to ignore. He had been at the scene on the night of the disappearance. He had introduced himself to investigators as a volunteer interpreter. Multiple witnesses had seen him outside apartment 5A after the alarm was raised. His name was Robert Murat. He was 33 years old, British-born, had grown up partly in Portugal, and lived 150 meters from apartment 5A. Within 2 weeks of Madeleine vanishing, he was named a formal suspect. But that investigation would go nowhere. And the real story, the one that would take 13 more years to fully surface, had nothing to do with Robert Murat at all. If you are watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe right now. It costs you nothing. This channel exists because people refuse to let these cases go quiet, and every subscriber tells the algorithm this content belongs in front of more people. Now, back to Portugal. Robert Murat was investigated for more than a year. His home was searched. His computer was seized. His associates were questioned. In the end, nothing. No evidence connecting him to the disappearance. He was cleared. He later successfully sued several British newspapers for libel over reporting he called completely false. And then, in September 2007, 4 months after Madeleine vanished, the Portuguese investigation did something that would haunt this case for years. It turned its suspicion toward Kate and Jerry McCann themselves. Both were declared arguidos, formal suspects, on the basis of what Portuguese investigators believed they had found in DNA analysis from the apartment and from the boot of a hire car the McCanns had rented weeks after the disappearance. Kate was questioned for 11 hours. Jerry was questioned separately. Both denied any involvement absolutely and completely. In July 2008, Portugal's Attorney General archived the case. Insufficient evidence to charge anyone with anything. The McCanns were cleared. The lead detective, Inspector Gonçalo Amaral, who had driven the theory of parental involvement, was removed. He later wrote a book making those accusations publicly. The McCanns sued him for libel. They won. The case was officially over. Except it was not. In 2011, the Metropolitan Police launched Operation Grange, a full independent inquiry staffed at its peak by 37 officers, with a public budget that would eventually reach £13.3 million. Their conclusion, stated clearly and publicly, this was a criminal act by a stranger, most likely an abduction. And then in June 2020, 13 years after a little girl disappeared from her bed in Portugal, German prosecutors released a name publicly for the very first time, Christian Brückner. And the moment you understand who Christian Brückner is and what he was doing in Praia da Luz during those years, you feel something very specific. The cold, particular fury that comes from understanding that this did not have to happen. Brückner was born in Germany in 1976. By 15, he already had a burglary conviction. By his late teens, he had been convicted of sexually abusing a child in Germany and sentenced to 2 years custody. Rather than serve it, at 18 years old, he ran. He fled to Portugal. He settled in the Algarve, that same strip of southern Portuguese coastline where Praia da Luz sits, and he stayed there for years. He worked odd jobs, he dealt drugs, he committed petty crimes across the region. At some point, he worked at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz as a pool attendant. He knew that complex. He knew those apartments. He knew which ones were ground floor. He knew which windows faced the quiet walkway beside the building. In 2004, he received a conviction in Germany for indecent exposure to young children. In 2005, he broke into the home of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz, tied her up, and raped her for approximately 15 minutes before stealing her computer and her money and walking away. Portuguese authorities investigated. The case was dropped in 2006. Insufficient evidence. Brückner was not arrested, not flagged, not watched. He stayed in the Algarve. 2 years later, Madeleine McCann disappeared from a ground floor apartment 1 mile from where that rape had occurred. German Chief Prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters said publicly in August 2025, Brückner is not just the number one suspect. He is the only suspect. There is a moment in every true crime case where the truth stops hiding and starts bleeding through the cracks. In the McCann case, that moment did not come with a DN, a lady match, or a courtroom confession. It came with 3 words. 3 words spoken by a man who believed he was speaking privately to someone he trusted. Words that could only have come from inside that bedroom. When German prosecutors went public with Brückner's name in 2020, they were drawing on years of investigative work that had been quietly building since 2017. That was the year a tip from a former associate led German investigators back to the 2005 rape of the American woman in Praia da Luz. A DNA match from hair found at the crime scene confirmed what the associate had described. Brückner was arrested, charged, and in 2019, the Braunschweig Regional Court convicted him of that rape and sentenced him to 7.5 years in prison. But while he sat in custody, something else was happening. People who had known him during his years in Portugal were beginning to talk. The most significant of them was a man named Helgi Busching, a German national who had run in the same circles as Brückner in the Algarve, stealing solar panels, dealing diesel, petty crime. He was not loyal, and what he told investigators and later told ITV News directly in 2025 was this. In a conversation about the Madeleine McCann case, Brückner had appeared to slip. He had said about a 3-year-old girl taken from her bed. She didn't scream.
And I tell him like this, I don't understand how somebody can rob the little children from a hotel, yeah? And then he said to me, yeah, she was not screaming. And I was thinking, okay.
She was not screaming?
Yeah, she was not screaming. And I know what I hear from him. I'm not stupid.
Those 3 words. Think about what they mean. That detail was not in any newspaper. It was not in any public account of the disappearance. There is no way to know that without being in that room. Bushing also told investigators that in 2006, a year before Madeleine vanished, he had broken into Brückner's home in Portugal to steal diesel fuel. And on a hard drive inside that house, he had found videos of Brückner committing rape, including what appeared to be a young German girl. Those videos were never recovered by police. Brückner said they do not exist. And then there is the phone data. On the evening of the 3rd of May 2007, Christian Brückner's mobile was active and pinging a cell tower in Praia da Luz. He was in the area that night. His vehicle, a distinctive Volkswagen T3 Westphalia camper van, was reported by witnesses near the Ocean Club on the same evening. All of this brought German prosecutors to a decision. In 2022, they charged Brückner with 3 counts of aggravated rape and 2 counts of child sexual abuse relating to incidents in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. Their strategy was to establish his pattern of offending in the Algarve during those years and build a path toward charging him in the McCann case. And then something happened that nobody expected. On the 8th of October 2024, the Braunschweig Regional Court acquitted Brückner on all counts. Evidence insufficient. Witnesses, including Bushing, deemed unreliable. Prosecutors appealed. That appeal is pending as of 2026. And on the 17th of September 2025, Christian Brückner walked out of Seine prison in Lower Saxony, climbed into a black Audi, and was driven away. Electronic ankle tag on his leg. Destination undisclosed. He has never been charged in connection with the disappearance of Madeleine Beth McCann. Stay with us, because the evidence assembled in this case across 3 countries and nearly 2 decades needs to be laid out in full. If you are still watching and you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit subscribe. This channel exists because people refuse to let these cases disappear. Let's keep going. Here is what the investigative record actually contains. Not rumor, not tabloid headlines. The facts. Brückner's mobile phone was pinging a cell tower in Praia da Luz on the evening of the 3rd of May 2007. This is not disputed. It places him within the geographical range of the Ocean Club on the night Madeleine vanished. His Volkswagen T3 Westphalia camper van was identified by German prosecutors as central to the investigation, and witnesses in the area around the Ocean Club that evening reported seeing a vehicle matching that description. Operation Grange identified a 4-fold increase in local burglaries in Praia da Luz in the months leading up to May 2007. 2 of those burglaries had already occurred in the McCann's own apartment block in the 17 days before Madeleine disappeared. In both prior cases, the intruder had entered through a window, a ground floor window, the same type of window that looked out over the narrow walkway beside apartment 5A. Helgi Bushing told ITV News directly. Christian knows the Ocean Club very well. He was working there as a pool boy. I think he was thinking, go into one apartment, take some stuff, but this time he didn't take luggage. He took her. And then there are those 3 words again. She didn't scream. Words that exist nowhere in the public record of this case. Words that could only come from one place. Chief Prosecutor Wolters stated publicly in August 2025 that the evidence linking Brückner to Madeleine's disappearance is real. He also said that under German evidentiary law, the threshold for bringing charges requires a higher standard of direct evidence than British or American courts demand. Without a confession, without physical evidence placing Brückner inside apartment 5A. Without something more, the charges may never come. Stack all of this together, and what you have is not a puzzle with missing pieces. What you have is a man that the investigators of 3 countries believe is responsible for taking a 3-year-old girl from her bed, and a legal system that cannot get its hands around him. The legal history of this case is a story about systems failing in sequence, each one handing the failure to the next. In Portugal, the investigation was archived in July 2008 by Attorney General Fernando Pinto Monteiro. Insufficient evidence to charge anyone. The McCanns were cleared. Inspector Gonçalo Amaral, who had driven the theory of parental involvement, was removed from the case, wrote a book promoting those allegations, was sued by the McCanns, and was ordered to pay damages. In Germany, the 2022 prosecution of Christian Brückner was the central legal battleground. The defense argued throughout that the witnesses were unreliable, the evidence was circumstantial, and that the prosecution was using the McCann case to poison the jury's perception of their client in a trial about entirely different offenses. On the 8th of October 2024, the Braunschweig court agreed. Acquitted on all counts, the appeal is pending. In the United Kingdom, Operation Grange, which once employed 37 officers, is now staffed by 3 police officers and 1 civilian, working part-time on an annual budget of £86,000. The total cost of the British investigation since 2011 has reached £13.3 million. Former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley described the current operation publicly as languishing, saying the team just about keeps the lights on. As of May 2026, 19 years after a 3-year-old girl disappeared from her bed in Portugal, no person has ever been charged. 3 countries, 19 years, no charges, no trial, no answer. Now we need to sit with the part nobody in an official position wants to say out loud. Because if you lay Christian Brückner's timeline in the Algarve next to law enforcement's response to him, what you find is a sequence of decisions that, had any one of them gone differently, might have meant Madeleine McCann never disappeared at all. In 1994, Brückner was convicted in Germany of child sexual abuse. He was sentenced to 2 years custody. In 1995, rather than serve it, he ran to Portugal. German authorities did not pursue extradition. Portuguese authorities were not notified in any meaningful operational way. He lived freely in the Algarve. In 2004, another conviction for indecent exposure to children, a suspended sentence. He remained in Portugal. In 2005, he raped a 72-year-old woman in her home in Praia da Luz. Portuguese police investigated and dropped the case in 2006. Brückner was not arrested, not flagged, not watched. He stayed in Praia da Luz, and on the 3rd of May 2007, a child vanished from a ground-floor apartment 1 mile from where that rape occurred. The case against Brückner for the American woman's rape was only reopened in 2017, when a tip from a former associate led investigators to a DNA match. 11 years after the crime, 10 years after Madeleine disappeared, the authorities had the rape. They had the location. They had the method. They chose not to pursue it, and a year and a half later, a different child was taken. That is not an opinion. That is a documented sequence of institutional decisions with a documented human cost. On the British side, the entire annual budget for the investigation of this case is £86,000. A single experienced detective in London earns between £60,000 and £80,000 a year. The entire investigation costs less than 1 officer's salary. Kate McCann has said publicly, "We would never give up on finding Madeleine. She deserves that. Every child deserves that. Every child deserves that." Hold that sentence, because the system entrusted to deliver it has found at nearly every turn in this case a reason not to. Jerry and Kate McCann have never stopped. Not for 1 year, not for 1 day. Within weeks of the disappearance, they established Madeleine's Fund, formerly Madeleine's Fund, leaving no stone unturned, to fund the private search when the official inquiry stalled. The fund raised millions, supported by donations from Simon Cowell, J.K. Rowling, and Richard Branson. Jerry McCann, a consultant cardiologist, continued working as a physician through all of it. He continued issuing statements on every anniversary, on every court date in Braunschweig, on every new development in Germany. 19 years of that. 19 years of choosing, every single morning, to keep going. Kate McCann returned to Praia da Luz as recently as 2022. She told the BBC she goes back because it is the last place she was with Madeleine, and that she still walks those streets looking for something, anything that might bring an answer. She wrote a memoir, Madeleine, published in 2011. Every penny of the proceeds went to the fund. The twins, Sean and Amelie, grew up in Rothley knowing from the earliest age they could understand anything that they had a sister who was missing. Kate described them as children who fully expected Madeleine to come home. Amelie, years after the disappearance, was photographed wearing Madeleine's shoes. A little girl wearing her missing sister's shoes because she expected her to come back for them. That one detail says more about the texture of this family's reality than any newspaper headline has ever managed to. Closure is not the right word here. Kate McCann has said so herself, explicitly. What this family has is not closure. What they have is survival. The knowledge that Madeleine's name is still being spoken in courtrooms, in government briefings, on channels exactly like this one because they refused every single day for 19 years to let it go quiet. Let me tell you who she was one more time. Not the case, not the suspect, not the 19-year investigation, Her, Madeleine Beth McCann, born the 12th of May, 2003. She loved Robbie Williams and danced to his songs in the living room in Rothley with everything she had. She loved Fireman Sam. She loved swimming. She had a stuffed cat called Cuddle Cat she would not sleep without. She had a pink blanket. She had blue-green eyes and a dark stripe across her right iris that made her gaze unlike anyone else who has ever lived. She was 3 years old, and she was splashing in a pool in the Portuguese sun, and she was asking questions at the breakfast table that her parents could not answer, and she was falling asleep with Cuddle Cat on the pillow beside her, and then she was gone. The last photograph ever taken of her, sitting next to her father at the pool, squinting into the afternoon light, her baby sister beside her. She looks completely ordinary. She looks completely alive. She looks like a child who has absolutely no idea what is coming. The investigation into what happened to Madeleine Beth McCann remains open. Christian Brückner, the man German prosecutors have named as their only suspect, has never been charged. He walked out of Sane prison on the 17th of September 2025. He is somewhere in Europe right now. Someone out there knows what happened inside apartment 5A on the night of the 3rd of May, 2007. Someone has been carrying a detail, a sighting, a conversation, something Brückner said, something they saw for 19 years. The tip lines are still open. Crime Stoppers, UK 0800555111. The Portuguese police tip line, +351 21 864 2000. If you know something, make that call. Madeleine deserves the truth. Her family deserves the truth. And the person who walked into that room and took her deserves to answer for it in a court of law. If this story moved you, if it made you angry in the way that demands something be done, hold on to that feeling. Share this video. Every share puts Madeleine's name in front of someone who might know something. Hit like so this reaches more people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because this channel exists for exactly this reason, to make sure that the children who disappear do not disappear twice. Once into the dark, and once into silence. Madeleine Beth McCann, born the 12th of May, 2003, still missing, still not forgotten. We will not stop talking about her until there is an answer.